Evening. Welcome back to the live reading of Underdogs, and yeah, not sure what there is to say before just diving into this, other than the usual stuff, and a little bit of news. It's not exactly dramatic, but as of today, I've started uploading these live readings to my YouTube channel, and obviously I can't quite call them live readings over there because they're just uploads of a video that once upon a time was live, and when I think about it, all videos were once live when they were being recorded. But anyway, I digress. So for anyone who's interested in viewing these on YouTube, well, the channel's there. It's just youtube.com/c/autistic-not-weird, or just Google autistic-not-weird, you'll find it. And other than that, today's discussion question: do you think that books or art or music are more important during lockdown scenarios? And if so, how are you using them? Are you finding them helpful, and in what way? And in fact, if you can give specific suggestions about what books or what music is helping you, then you might be able to connect other people to those resources as well. So, other than that, there's nothing else that I can think of the need to say. 15 people watching already. That's good. And making the assumption, just like yesterday, that most of the people who end up watching this video won't be watching live. So I'll be trying to narrate this in a way that also makes sense to people who aren't watching it while it's happening. But anyway, I think I've talked enough, so it's time to go it. And is that Ronnie? Hello. So, Chapter 7. Last thing that happened was it was a Raj chapter, and there was an explanation as to how the clones took over and all the rest of it. This chapter goes back to the strike team, who, when we last saw them, had just decided to go to New London and trying to find the tool that was in Kitana's backpack. So, off we go. Chapter 7. 7 in the morning, and Ewan was awake. A drowsy, just 5 more minutes kind of awake. His brain told him to get to his feet, so his team would feel motivated to follow suit once they awoke. His body told his brain to get stuffed. Apparently, even his own demands were demands to be avoided. Oh, hey Egan. He decided to play his trump card. Reliving the memories of his worst day on Earth always woke him up. Let's do this. Another couple of months of this strategy, and he would hate the very thought of sleeping in. Ewan squeezed his eyes closed and remembered. The morning he refused to go to Oakenfold because screw it. Dad bursting through the front door, home early from the barracks with a ton of weapons in the back of his car, yelling something about Marshall Pierce Solutions. Ewan didn't think to ask why nobody had stopped him taking the firearms. His aunt, uncle and little Alfie finding their way to the house and barricading it for some kind of last stand. They had believed the soldiers were human back then, which made it harder to open fire. Escaping through the bathroom window with an assault rifle, the last survivor of the West family, and avoiding gunfire as he ripped through the garden hedge. Heading to Oakenfold with no better ideas than finding his schoolmates in a field along the way. Just students, no staff. An argument about whether to protect the Block 1 group, the students with severe learning difficulties, as enemy soldiers approached from the edge of the field. Then Mark's voice, the same Mark who comfortably lay in Spitfire's right at that moment, ending the debate with the words, "Get bloody running, they're not worth it." Everyone obeying him, believing there was no other choice, and leaving the Block 1 students to be captured. Ewan scouting ahead of the pack, and a confrontation that ended in the death of a human. But why? Why in the name of hell did it have to be that human? And then McCormick. Ewan returned to his senses, all tiredness gone from his head. The story of Takeover Day ended there, or at least the story he retold himself, and he brought himself back into the hunter's house. One split second, I think I just came across something that isn't literally a continuity error right now, but if I don't get it in before Underdogs 2 gets published, it might be. Because the Takeover Day story gets retold there as well, and I just want to make sure it's consistent. Okay. This is the advantage about reading your own books before the sequels are published. You catch yourself in the act of potentially making some mistakes. Oh, hey Kim, good to see you. So anyway, Ewan has just closed his eyes and remembered the worst day of his life, because it's a way of helping him to get over his need to sleep in, because, well, there's no point in staying asleep now I've got that on my mind. It's a bizarre tactic, but if it works, it works. The early sun was lighting up Lemsford, as far as Ewan could see through the grubby windows. The hunter's living room looked dull and dead, like the decaying heart of a dusty corpse of a building. He rolled over to find Charlie's sleeping body hanging off the sofa. Ewan may have been trapped in a frightening, unforgiving world, but at least he was in good company. Alex wandered down the stairs, letting out a casual belch. "Morning, mate," he said. He was usually friendlier in the mornings for some reason. "So, are we going to New London or what?" "Yep." "Figured so. Do comms know yet?" "They're about to." The conversation had awoken Kate at the far end of the room. Jack made noises through the floorboards upstairs, his watch over. Just one person left. "Hey, Charlie." Charlie stirred just a little. "It's 7. We're going now." "Yeah, I'll meet you there." Charlie pulled the covers over his head and didn't see Ewan's foot before it poked him in the ribs. "We're heading off, mate. Up you get." No answer. Ewan looked at his friends and stuck a thumb towards the front door, and the rest of his team started to prepare themselves. "Authority can only work some of the time, right?" whispered Kate. "Even for natural-born leaders." "A natural-born leader? Is that what Kate thinks of me?" "Oh, hi Tyler. Good to have you watching." Ewan remembered the leader of some youth group he'd been kicked out of when he was 12, who had once told him that true leaders were born, not made. He had said it with such pride that Ewan could almost see his head swelling up like a hot air balloon. Shame he didn't float away. If there were such a thing as a natural-born leader, it was not Ewan West. He had been raised in the Dr. Joseph McCormick School of Responsibility, and knew that true leadership skills came from being given opportunities and making the most of them. It wasn't womb magic. Oh yeah, that's kind of similar to my own experience as a teacher as well. I grew up being told that teachers are born, not made, which is a complete load of rubbish, to be honest. In my experience, good teachers are made by the same process that good doctors or lawyers or carpenters or anything else are made. They're given opportunities, they make the most of those opportunities, and they become good. It's nothing you're born with. Experience had also told Ewan that leadership was about relationships, not about loud voices. Within 10 minutes, Charlie was up and dressed, and it wasn't because Ewan had commanded him to. It was the result of several years' friendship between them, and the respect that had come with it. When the time came to leave the hunter's house in peace, Charlie had joined the team like the dutiful lad he truly was. The countryside had awoken around the Underdogs during their trek, but it was difficult to see any beauty in the spring morning. As much as Ewan liked quiet countryside, he could only take so many miles of overgrown crop fields, wet, dewy grasslands, and unmaintained tarmac roads. The journey had become less boring once they had passed St Albans, as the Citadel's walls began to dominate the horizons. The closer Ewan got, the less he could see either side of them, until nothing was left to his east or west except reinforced concrete walls. The team had needed to venture dangerously close to detection range, close enough to see the fields of cracked mud in the distance. Grass had not grown in the shadows of the northern wall for a long time. The Citadel of New London, this gargantuan concrete fortress, stretched out in an 8 by 10 mile rectangle, the outer city walls 26 floors high and close to a mile thick. Dr. McCormick, lecturer in mathematical sciences at 2 universities, had not taken long to work out the volume of the walls. The number he had used was something like 8.7 billion cubic meters. Ewan couldn't make sense of the numbers, and only sort of knew what a cubic meter was. He just knew that 8.7 billion was big. And it didn't even include the floor space of the inner city prison. About 2 million people must have been forced in there on takeover day, another estimation from McCormick, although the number of prisoners must have dropped over the course of 11 cruel months. "Tell me that's not what I think it is," said Jack out of nowhere. Ewan's eyes lowered to the path ahead. and landed on the distant sight of 3 navy blue uniforms on the grass. He set off, his weapon held high just in case. Out of habit, he took a moment to check it was the rifle with the knife mark. His rifle. Cameron's, yeah, I dislike the fact I missed most of your reading from me, but I love it. Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's I kind of have conflicting opinions about it. On the one hand, I'm here to read, so I shall read. But on the other, I think it's a bit more interesting if I stop reading once in a while and just give some context or some explanation or something. As long as I don't do it so much that it breaks up the flow. But yeah, thanks for saying that. I was kind of wondering if I was doing the right thing here. Where was I? Oh yeah. The clones were part-way through decomposition. Their hair had fallen from their rotten scalps, and the blood from their torso wounds had turned from globs to faint red powder. Just like their lives, their decay didn't take much time. Jack had once described Grant's soldiers as the fast food version of life, and he had a point. One of the many things Ewan hated about clones was their lifespan of 4 months. The ones that had slaughtered his family had aged themselves to pieces long ago, and he was powerless to claim his revenge. On them, at least. Ugh, muttered Alex. They smell like vomit left out in the sun. How long do you think? 12 hours, Ewan answered. Maybe more. They were stabbed, all 3 of them. The new girl, muttered Charlie. Shannon. She must have been here last night, just a few minutes from New London. Ewan glanced at the clones' faces, and then wished that he hadn't. Their white cheeks were covered in skin flakes that blew away in the gentle wind, and their tongues had started to go mushy. Their eyeballs were nearly but not quite fixed in their sockets. She ran from here to Sandwich? Asked Kate. I really wish I'd chosen a village that doesn't quite sound like Sandwich, but yeah, it's Sandridge. It was either that or death by Keith Tyler, answered Ewan. Let's keep going. If we miss our chance, we're stuffed. Ewan set off at speed, leaving the clones to decompose in peace. 5 minutes to 9. At the brow of a small hill, Ewan bent down to conceal himself. The citadel of New London was in full view over the hill's peak, its walls spread from one corner of his eyesight to the other. Ewan had never been allowed on school trips to see old castles or walled cities, but he had searched for them online in his own time. The love of learning had always been there, whether or not his schools could accommodate him. New London made a mockery of every castle that Ewan had ever researched. Larger than life, no medieval finery or Renaissance architecture, and absolute hell within its walls. 1 second. Got a nasty feeling they've written something in the sequel that features Ewan on a school trip somewhere, or remembering being on a school trip. Anyway, the citadel was up and down the country with the Grant-era version of the fortresses of old. More technology, less beauty, and no mercy to be found within. The walls were guarded by innumerable snipers that made them impossible to approach, but the Underdogs knew better than to strike against reinforced concrete anyway, because out to the side of the citadel, in a countryside spot where a canal had been dug all the way to the River Thames, there lay a water treatment plant. Its entrance was guarded by few enough clone soldiers, and it was far enough from New London to be out of sniper range. Ewan and his team crouched where the wild grass met the dull sanded beach, awaiting their opportunity. What's the time? Asked Kate. Time you got a watch, said Alex. I've got one. We just need to go on a raid for batteries. It's exactly 9 o'clock on April 25th, said Jack, starting to stim with his fingers. And the Land Rover's coming. Ewan struggled to get the image in his dental mirror, but the rumble of a motor vehicle was unmistakable. Even after 11 months of fighting the creatures, Ewan sometimes had trouble telling them apart from real humans. The factory-grown replicas shared every feature of their creators. Facial expressions, fingerprints, moles, bad farts. They sweated when they exercised, cracked their knuckles when they got bored, and bit their tongues while eating. Other than their uniforms and silence, there was little to distinguish them. Except, of course, their anger. When they engaged in combat, an inbuilt aggression kicked in, one which put even Ewan and Charlie to shame, and an apparent thirst for violence' sake. It had been engineered into them to provide a combat advantage. And wow, Ewan found it frightening to fight someone who truly wanted to kill him. The Land Rover glimmered in his mirror. Shift change in 1 minute, he whispered. Volunteer? Yeah, laughed Charlie. Which one of us is the most expendable? Nice one, Charlie. Now get ready to run. Is that a joke? Has to be one of us. But I'm not the best. Forget it, said Kate. I'll break in. I've done it before. She pressed her body against the bank, ready to leap over at Ewan's signal. From the corner of his eye, he could see her facial features beginning to quiver. She was scared, but doing it anyway. As usual. Ewan thrust 2 fingers towards the entrance, and Kate vanished, leaving a cloud of sand in her wake. How's it looking? Asked Alex. The Land Rover just arrived, the replacement soldiers are getting out, and yep, the night guards are leaving to meet them. Here's a chance. As the 3 new clones leapt from the Land Rover, the 3 at the entrance walked over to meet them. Kate race-walked along the path between the settling tank and the tunnel entrance as the 2 shifts passed one another, each group barely acknowledging the other's existence. The changing of the guard, muttered Jack. He seems to have lost his finesse in recent years. Shh! They seemed peaceful enough, since enemies weren't near. Their peace and war personas differed enormously, and at that moment they were far from the psychotic, anger-driven beings they became in combat. With Kate safely through the entrance, the replacement team stood in position, oblivious to the new intruder. The other team climbed into the Land Rover and reignited the engine. A soldier in each group fetched out a radio and started tapping. Despite their lack of vocal cords, the clones had communication methods designed for them. The most common one seemed like a simplified Morse code, communicated with the presses of a single black button, although in more hostile situations, the red panic button was pressed first. The irony was not lost on Ewan. Grant may have viewed his clones as disposable weapons, but he did more to help them communicate than society had done for people like Simon. I can't help but think, actually, of the amount of impossible accommodations that we can't do for autistic employees or disabled employees or children that are only just becoming possible now that everyone else is impacted by it too. So yeah, I almost see a kind of parallel between real life and this, where yeah. Kate's inside, Ewan said. Fire exit, now. Ewan led the strike team onto the untended grass, and they ran for the fire exit a few metres along the access tunnel. Within moments of reaching the curved metal door, it flew open to reveal a panting Kate on the other side. You know, back at Oakenfold, the fire doors were alarmed, she said with a laugh. So's this one if you open it from the outside, answered Ewan. Maybe one day they'll make New London as secure as a special school. Let's hope not, muttered Kate, letting her friends through the door and holding it shut behind her. The 5 underdogs were on a direct route to the Citadel walls, fiercely outnumbered but totally unnoticed. Guys, said Alex, one of us should probably call McCormick and... Yeah, well volunteered, Alex finished, retrieving his mobile phone from his pocket. I gathered. Up in the attic of the Boys Brigade Hall... Oh, by the way, for those who don't know who the Boys Brigade are... we're the people who invented the Scouts. We're a Christian youth organisation who basically have a very long history, but basically we're a youth group. Up in the attic of the Boys Brigade Hall, lit by the glow of a dozen battery-powered camping lights, McCormick warmed his hands against his 4th cup of tea. Simon was outside for a quick loo stop. For any Americans, that means toilet break, loo stop. And McCormick felt uneasy with him gone. Not just because a vulnerable boy was out in the open, or because they were supposed to have 2 people in the comms unit at all times during missions. After 3 years as a widower, it was still painful for McCormick to be alone. A noise came from the games room below. Simon had returned and stumbled among the tangled mess of cobwebs, plastic hockey sticks and foam footballs. Did you replace the manhole cover this time? McCormick asked as Simon climbed the ladder. The boy nodded. Pardon? Yes, came a whisper from Simon's mouth. Ah, good, I've got him talking, McCormick thought, and all I needed to do was take him to a silent room miles from any other living person. It wasn't even a Down syndrome issue. Like most others with selective mutism, it was related to anxiety more than learning difficulties. I still can't believe your Boys Brigade captain let you keep the games room like that, McCormick said, hoping it would start a conversation. The 22nd Durham Company never stood for it in my day. I blame kids for that. They messy, and never have respect for things. Simon's grammar was like a foreigner learning English. That at least could be seen as Down syndrome related, but just hearing him talk was enough. Simon closed the hatch and took his seat next to McCormick. But they were nice kids. They didn't make fun of my face, except Luke, but I said him to shut up, because I'm old now. You're far from being old, Simon. We've had this conversation before, thought McCormick, most times when he comes here, and I have to admire his mother for taking the gamble she did. Not every youth group can take a boy like Simon and leave him better off for the experience. I just hope he was treated like a full member of the group, rather than just the one everyone looks after. Either way, I'm glad he went. We got a communications building out of it. McCormick tried to remember whether he had ever thanked Simon for offering the Boys Brigade Hall as a secondary base. He sighed when he realised the answer was probably not the one he wanted. He had been too preoccupied with security issues, escape options, the lack of soundproofing, whether the comms unit was enough villages away from Spitfire's Rise, and the dangers of having a boy in his team who knew its location. Spitfire's Rise itself was so far from Oakenfold that the students had only found it after getting lost, which had been helpful in the long run. Ewan, the first student to arrive at the house on takeover day, had been the only one to approach via a road and see the name of the village. Upon returning to the countryside to fetch the others, he had insisted they use the fields. And in the weeks that followed, McCormick had sent him far and wide to remove every sign that contained a village name, along with all the road signs on streets they were ever likely to use. But even then, risks remained. The location of Spitfire's Rise was no secret to McCormick or Ewan, and Simon had spent half his childhood in the hall that had become their comms unit. "Did they call while I was away?" asked Simon. "Not just yet," said McCormick, flipping through a stolen copy of map references. "So Ewan and Charlie will be heading for the forensic investigation room to look for Tyler's backpack. That'll be on page 10, square C6. "Page 10, answered Simon. "What floor?" "Floor J. Looks like they'll be keeping Tyler's things up high." Simon peered through the stack of maps on the side table, each printed on A1 paper. For any Americans, that means very big paper. And big enough to need both of his hands. He found the 10th sheet, removed it from the pile, and spread it out in front of McCormick until the far sides flopped off the edges of the desk. "How did we fight it without these?" "Not very well," answered McCormick. "That's why we didn't get much done in the early months. We didn't know where things were. And Ewan was too busy training us with what little his dad had taught him." "Thankfully," McCormick continued, "Ben Christie only photocopied them, and put the originals back so nobody would know." "Ben was a good man," muttered Simon. "He was, rest his soul. Here we are." McCormick's finger landed on square C6, and he found the forensic investigation room at the tip of his nail. He prepared a mental route to the nearest flight of stairs, since Ewan would not be stupid enough to use the lift or the monorail system. Once the route was memorised, McCormick stood up to stretch his legs. For the first time, he saw the whole map at once, and the sheer sight of it forced him to take a deep breath. It was an architect's dream and nightmare. 26 stories, all of them packed with offices, computer hubs, munitions factories, power generators, archives, missile silos, aircraft hangars, residential quarters, habitation and training facilities, and 100 other types of purpose-built rooms. But the inner city was the most striking part of the map. It was totally blank. Grant had shipped everyone into his overgrown factory floor and just left them to it. There was no architecture, no planning, no indication of how these people would live. "Simon's parents are in there," thought McCormick. "In fact, most of us have relatives in that big blank rectangle. Except Ewan. And me. Maybe Barbara was lucky to die 3 years ago." "I've been thinking," muttered Simon. "Go on." "What's when we free New London? Do we go New Brighton and start again?" He's thinking ahead. Impressive. "Hopefully not," McCormick replied. "This place is Grant's throne. He controls everything from here. If we're lucky, we'll cut off the head and the body will die." Simon looked confused by the analogy. McCormick planned to wait at least 5 seconds before explaining, just in case Simon could work it out for himself. Independent thinking skills meant everything. But then the phone on his desk vibrated. The old man's hand seized it and accepted the call. Alex's face appeared on screen, surrounded by a curved metal tunnel. McCormick noticed that the rest of the strike team members were 100 metres behind him. Alex was going into lone wolf mode early, again. "Oh, hey, Callie." "We're inside, sir," Alex said. "Should reach the walls in 10 minutes-ish. Any casualties at the treatment plant?" "Not a soul. And no clones either, come to think of it." "Excellent," replied the old man with a grin. "Let's bring down the factory." That's the end of Chapter 7. Taking a quick break for a drink. And if anyone has any questions, comments, etc. Unfortunately, someone is calling the phone I'm using to... I'm going to decline that. Sorry, mate. In fact, one thing I've not done is loaded the video up on my laptop just in case, because the weird thing is about Facebook Live videos, sometimes it doesn't show you the comments, so it shows you on the phone, but for some reason they don't appear on the laptops or something. But anyway, so chapter 8. And by the way, if you do have any answers to the question, do you think books or art or music are more important during lockdown scenarios? And if so, how are you using them? Feel free to recommend any resources that you're using that may help other people watching this. Or in fact, yesterday's question, which characters do you like and why? Or just any comments or insights about the story at all. Any comments appreciated. But chapter 8, here we go. Kate wondered whether the tunnel had been designed specifically to give her claustrophobia, but knew deep down that it had simply been the cheaper option to build. New London must have cost enough without the expense of making it look pretty. The tunnel ended at a concrete wall which separated the maze of Floor Z from the outside world. The strike team paused outside the door, Ewan taking his place at the front of the group. Right, he began. Each of you needs to tell me what you're doing. I want all of us certain from minute 1. Kate tried to arrange her own answer in her head, so she wouldn't get it wrong and be looked down upon by the others. Charlie, you first. Something about an evidence locker, Charlie replied. On floor J. The forensic investigation room, Ewan said with a huff, searching for Tyler's backpack. Once we get it, we search for Shannon's tool. Oh, while still having no idea what it is, or whether it even exists. And I still don't believe it does, by the way. Not believing in something doesn't stop it from existing, said Jack. Now listen to Ewan. Ewan continued, his face pointed towards Charlie as if to force the information into his friend's brain. Kate had hated it when her old teachers had done that to her, as if she had either been unwilling to listen or just plain stupid. Oh, hey, Elia. What was I? Perhaps the habit had rubbed off on Ewan during his old mainstream days. We search for Shannon's tool, Ewan said slowly, then join Alex and Kate. What are you both doing? We're heading to floor F, Alex interrupted, because going to the 6th highest floor in New London isn't in the least bit dangerous. Kate felt annoyance and relief both at once. Alex's interruption had saved her the pressure of speaking, but removed the chance to prove that she could do it. Tell me what you're doing there, said Ewan. Taking a look at the clone factory, Alex answered. Figuring out a way in and making sure there's a clear path for you to join us. Good. Hope you're okay with 20-story climbs. No, sir, said Alex. They scare me. Whatever. Jack? And there it was. The opportunity for Kate to contribute to the conversation, gone and never coming back. She shrugged off the guilt as it approached, and reminded herself that Alex had done a good enough job by himself. Her contributions rarely added much anyway. Jack directed his gaze towards the metal door next to them. I'll be guarding the exit, standing here and looking pretty, like those Red London guards they used to have. I'll make sure I don't smile either. Right, Ewan finished. Looks like we're good to go. Keep yourself safe, and if you run into trouble, tell the rest of the team before phoning comms. Warn the other troops about the threat before it kills them too, sneered Charlie. Well, yeah. Any questions? Kate had nothing to ask, but knew better than to raise questions in front of a group anyway. Experience told her that it was better to just ask at the end when the others had dispersed. Just the one, Jack answered. Why are you lot still here? Ewan rolled his eyes and readied his hands against the bar across the door. United by our differences, guys, he said. United, everyone replied. Kate took a deep breath, and Ewan pushed the door open to reveal the lion's den on the other side. The outer city held path after path of silver-walled corridors, featuring little more than light bulb panels and painted numbers at each junction. Grant had wasted no effort on decorations. The corridors were dull, function-built, and void of any personality. But a walk through the outer city was never boring. The very atmosphere, the invisible feel of the Citadel walls, forced Kate to imagine danger around every conceivable corner. It felt like the Citadel itself wanted her dead. She wondered whether it was the same for her friends too, whether they could no longer see a grey corridor without fearing death. It couldn't have just been an anxiety thing. Alex, said Ewan to her side, I'll take the gadgets. We'll need them more. Alex surrendered the rucksack without a fight. Ewan took off towards a narrowed sign and vanished into the nearest stairwell, Charlie giving chase. Kate ran McCormick's directions through her head, 2 or 3 times to be sure, and began her walk through the corridors. "Have fun down there, Jack," said Alex as he started to follow. Just in case that was sarcasm, I'll be having far more fun than you." Alex and Jack exchanged a few more words, none of which registered in Kate's mind as she walked. Her concentration was fixed on getting the journey right. A 10-minute walk, then take stairwell 42 to floor F. It would be the top exit, since floors A to E need special clearance through 1 at a time stairwells. 1 floor at a time stairwells, that says. That was what their map said anyway. None of the Underdogs had ever been that high. Out of the stairwell, then turn left, then another 5 minutes to the clone factory. Easy, in theory. A 10-minute walk in the outer city walls felt like an hour. 10 minutes with Alex was even longer. But behind his irritating manner, he was an ideal combat partner. Marksman skills at long range, taekwondo skills at close range. Or so he said. But he had complained about being partnered from the moment Ewan had given the instructions on the journey over. Kate had spent hours in silence, believing Alex had wanted to avoid her specifically, and it had taken her far too long to realise it was nothing personal. In most missions, Alex seemed to find it easier when there was nobody else around him. Stairwell 42 was easy enough to find, marked with the stencil painted letters 42Z on the door. Kate took a deep breath, knowing she and Alex were 20 floors away from the door which would read 42F. She walked through the door, stopped in the middle of the stairwell's bottom floor and looked up. "And you're sure it's unsafe to take the lift?" asked Alex. "We're sure," Kate answered, catching her breath at the sight alone. The concrete stairs were formed in a rectangle, leaving a hollow chamber in the middle, most likely for transporting objects too heavy to carry up the stairs. The ceiling of floor F was high above, with some tiny objects attached that must have been a pulley system. "If you think it looks creepy now, wait till you're at the top. Let's get this over with, Alex." Kate led the way up to floor Y, then floor X. Some people, Jack for example, could recite the alphabet backwards without a problem. Some, like severely dyslexic Raj, could say it forwards but take a while to write it. Kate was academically somewhere in between, and found it easier to just count down from 20 as she passed the exits. She lost count on floor T, when she heard footsteps that weren't her own, or Alex's. She looked at him. He stared back, with an unusual look of concern on his face. The footsteps approached at a regular speed, neither fast enough to be running, nor slow enough to be stalking. It was just a solo soldier, doing his rounds along the stairwell. Alex pointed to the exit door, and Kate nodded. When she opened the door, a second clone was standing 10 metres away. There was a brief moment of eye contact, a shared moment of surprise, then Alex shot him dead. His body collapsed to the ground, collapsed to the sound of the gunshots echoing up and down the stairwell. Kate gritted her teeth. Even by her standards, it was bad luck beyond belief. "It's never luck," Ewan's voice sounded in Kate's head, as the footsteps above her stopped. A shadow on the wall revealed the clone's place on the floor above. Kate struck first. Kate had once been a gymnast. It had been the hobby during her worst days that had proven once a week that she wasn't totally useless. And at 16, her skills remained. She jumped onto the railings beside her, and used them as a launch pad to reach the level above. She grabbed the concrete ground of floor S with one hand, lifted her assault rifle in the other, and sprayed bullets ahead where she thought the clone's legs would be. But she had misjudged the clone's speed. He leapt into view onto the steps beside her, and reached out with his own rifle. It was a thin, blonde clone. There were only about 30 different models, and Kate had come to know most of them. And he was angry. His artificial brain had slipped into war mode, and it was sure to come with an advantage in physical strength. Hanging precariously onto the concrete floor above, Kate thrust her rifle to the side where it clashed with the clone's. A struggle of strength followed, like an arm wrestle, as each combatant tried to push their weapon in front of the opponent's body. The clone was staring into her face, with the most aggressive expression he could manage. "Come on, Alex, a telescopic handgun and you still don't have a clean shot?" Her thoughts were answered by his gunfire below. There must have been even more clones in the corridor. Kate was on her own and losing. Most arm wrestles ended with cheating, so it didn't surprise Kate when the clone used both hands on his rifle, an option she didn't have. Kate dropped her rifle to free one hand, grabbed the head of the clone's rifle and pushed it aside. Her enemy could not point his weapon in her direction, but her own was toppling down towards floor Z. But her other hand was tiring. She couldn't hold on to the ledge forever. She jerked the rifle out of the clone's two-handed grip, but couldn't grasp it for herself before it fell down the stairwell. With no firearms between them, it was safe for Kate to swing towards the stairs again and land back in place. The clone, half a story above her, drew out a hunting knife in one hand. He grinned widely and reached for the radio attached to his belt. I've got about 5 seconds before he pulls it out and pushes the panic button. If I don't kill him, he'll alert the whole of New London. Alex continued his gunfight along the corridor, the stairwell out of his range. Kate put her hand against her own knife, by far her least favourite weapon, and ran up the stairs. I don't know how much training he's had with that knife, but he'll be better than me. The clone, 5 steps up, leapt at her. Kate did not draw out her knife. She would not enter a bladed fight knowing she would lose. Her family had always advised her to know her strengths and play to them, and the same applied to combat. Although Kate was a medium-sized girl, years of gymnastics had given her some fantastic physical strength. Her left hand caught the clone's wrist as he brought the knife down. Her right hand grabbed his leg behind the knee and lifted. The clone barely had time to register what was happening before Kate threw both arms over the railings and released him. He's not a real person, she thought as the clone hit the concrete 6 floors below. He's a genetically programmed killing machine, built specifically to murder people like you. Don't let it get to you, ignore it, distract yourself of something. Yeah, Kate will do what is necessary in order to win the war, but she does not like killing people, including clones. Even though she is apparently quite good at it. The right distraction came immediately. The gunfire had stopped on floor T, and Alex was gone. Kate ran down the stairs and peered through the stairwell exit. Alex was standing over the first clone's body, swearing to himself. Alex? He turned back to Kate, marched into the stairwell, and thrust the dead clone's assault rifle into her hands. Don't bother going downstairs for your own. We don't have time. How come? They know we're here. Kate stopped breathing. The last one, finished Alex. He got away. And you didn't go after him? It was unlike Kate to get angry, but she had risked death by 100 stab wounds to keep their presence a secret. Alex had been armed. He was leading me down a blind corridor, Alex said. If I'd gone after him, he'd have shot me dead and then pressed the panic button. Come on, he finished, launching himself up the stairs. Either we get this done quickly, or this day will get very bad. And that's the end of Chapter 8. Right, so the action inside New London has begun, and I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say that things don't get any quieter or more relaxing from here. So, unless anyone has any questions, comments, and anything like that, I think we're basically done for the day. And thank you to everyone who's been watching, and especially thanks to those who have followed all 4 of the episodes so far, whether you followed them live on Facebook or whether you've caught up on them afterwards, or even watching them on YouTube. Just to finish off, if anyone wants to read the rest of the thing, I'm going to, unless Julie beats me to it, I'm going to post some links to where you can find the rest of the book. Here we go. There you go. The comments that have just left and pinned has links to Amazon, both the UK and the US sites, and yep, looks like me and Julie both posted it at the same time, but doesn't matter. And there's also an audiobook out there for someone who's a bit more competent at reading than I am. But Paul's left comments. Thanks, Chris. Caught up to the point where I remember reading to before lockdown. Looking forward to tomorrow. Well, yeah, thank you very much for following, and thanks for your comments as well. And yep, that's it. I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks a lot.